we don't very often get men of this calibre or anyone of this calibre wandering into the Howie Games studio. This man is modest. When I texted him to come on the show, he's like, what do you want to have me on for? But, gee, I have got that many questions for you. I hope you've set aside a good 2.5 hours. Mate, welcome to the Howie Games. A treat to have you on here.
Howie, thank you. So I've got chronic imposter syndrome, and I sent that to you privately, is some of the people we most love have been on this podcast, so that's not lost on me. So thank you for inviting me. This is your last chance to back out.
No, I'm not backing out. You people have heard it in the intro that remarkably, we haven't never really worked together.
No.
We sit with a glass barrier between us at football matches, cricket games. I see you in at Fox, but I've learnt, Gerard, never to hide these things. I'm an enormous fan of your work, And I know that can be uncomfortable in a situation with two blokes sitting in a room that know each other socially, but I don't see the point of beating around the bush. I'm a tremendous fan of everything you do. I'm a listener and a watcher. So, mate, it is a privilege to have you here on the show.
So that's very kind, Howie. And so I want a chance to say this publicly. I've said it to you privately before. I am in huge admiration of what you've built in this. It's very difficult in the hustle bustle of media to create an intimate space, a space where people come and they clearly feel a level of comfort and trust. And I've been a foundation listener, but thinking through the James Hird episode up to the Meg Lanning episode. So you can't get that in the modern media without creating something like this. So at the risk of turning it into a wank fest at the start,
I like
salute
it.
to you.
Thanks, mate.
Because it is unique, and I've said this publicly before, is I feel like you're the one to master the podcast for the Australian sporting media.
Thank you, mate.
Well done.
Well, no pressure. So am I going to be able to bring you to tears? Is there deep, dark secrets we don't know?
I've had a very sheltered and privileged upbringing. I do exactly what I love, so I doubt it.
Mate, I mentioned in the intro, you're here with Fox, you're here with SEN, you're here with Nine. How you've done that, like the amount of invoices you're putting out at the moment is quite extraordinary, and congratulations for that. Before we get to the Olympics, etc., this will come out at the start of July, and it will have happened a couple of weeks ago. The Hall of Fame last night. Congratulations. You're up there with legends of the game. My first sporting hero, you're up there with Jason Dunstall, you're up there with Dane Swan. A lot of this discussion is going to be preparation and how much you do. Tell me the lead-in to the night that was last night, and congratulations on a wonderfully well-done job.
Thank you. So it's an incredible privilege to do, so that's the starting point of it. And my only role is to ensure that the inductees first have a great night. You want it to be the culmination of what they've experienced in football, and you want them to feel comfortable speaking about themselves. So many deflect.
Yes.
But the spirit of the night is the Hall of Fame members gather to welcome the new class in. So it's sort of having that conversation with each of the inductees to ease the fears about don't self-deprecate, don't deflect. This is the moment where everyone wants to hear you tell their story because we're hoisting you up on shoulders.
Which is what I'm doing with you today. So I don't want any of that self-deprecation or depreciation, as I heard it described on the radio the other day. So do you speak to Jason and Dane and all these luminaries in the lead-up?
Yes,
so this is what people won't understand.
Yeah, so one of the beautiful parts for me is we'd spend 12 minutes on stage together, but I get an hour or an hour and a half with them in the lead up to
in person?
Sometimes in person, sometimes on the phone. So I had a long time with Jason on a Wednesday afternoon, which was lovely. So I've worked in and out with Jason along the way, and I lived some of his story, but I've never spoken to him at length about it. And so we did a 16th of what we did privately, we did publicly. So I get like how lucky am I to have those conversations. So yeah, it's trying to find down the essence. So all we're trying to do is give the essence of the story, and that requires maybe 6 trigger points.
Wow.
Origin stories, the breakthrough, the best years, reflections, that sort of thing. So it's road testing a few different stories as to what takes us closest to who they are, what they feel most comfortable about, and then just little ones like it's when Kelvin Templeton tells the story that he got tipped off that he won the Brownlow, you go, oh, that's beautiful.
Yes.
Like the room will eat that up.
Yes.
So we definitely want to tell that story. And yeah, so there's hours involved. You would say it's a long process, except it's the most beautiful, enjoyable process. and not to do it too far in advance because you want it to be fresh in everyone's minds as to what we're going to deliver when we get there. And then on the night, hopefully there's a level of comfort. They know these are the stories I'll tell. You work the room and then go back. As I often say, when they go back to the 360 set afterwards, there's sort of this decompress. You can see it is the on-stage part. It's a big deal for them. So you want it to be as beautiful as possible, and then they can reflect and know that they've enjoyed the night and spend the rest of it with their families.
So Dane Swan, obviously, I can't picture you at the Rising Sun in his natural area having a beer with him, but I thought you did beautifully last night when he dropped an F-bomb in his opening 30-second salvo. He started very hot, and I was trying to keep an eye on you because I knew we'd be chatting about today. You look pretty cool, and you didn't. That's Dane. That is the beautiful thing about Dane, and a lot of people would. If they got up there and spoke like that, it's the Billy Brownless effect. The things Billy will say on the radio, if you or I said, holy moly.
Yes.
But when Billy or Dane says them, that's them. That's okay.
Yeah, so that's his true self.
Yes.
And there's you have to be mindful. It is live on air nationally, so a little bit careful on that front. But, yeah, so he came in hot, and then I think he just sort of settled a little bit after that. But, he was as risque as
he was.
The line at the end, which I wouldn't be brave enough to repeat.
We'll play it right here. Don't worry. Tommy's got it up his sleeve.
So and that was exactly true to his character. And you get the next day, the fans respond to it, and you go, oh, we've missed him. That's exactly who he was. That's what we don't have very often on the football landscape. So giving him the space to be that, as well as just staying in the bounds of taste.
You controlled him well. Mate,
I really didn't.
I'm going to do this a bit differently today, which is something we haven't done. Tommy and I cooked it up. You know Tommy, you've worked with very well. And I'm going to play bits of vision and audio to you, which I don't know how uncomfortable that will be for you. What do you like, or how do you feel about hearing or watching yourself post? Because, well, it must be impossible for you to avoid yourself.
Yes. I do get home, and if they're watching 360, which is rare, I don't want it to sound like they are actually that interested in what
do
I do
they
at
not get dinner if they haven't watched 360 when you get home?
I do ask them to turn it off.
Right.
Every now and then you get to make up the next day and the replay is on, and you say to Lauren, I can't have that on again. You do get used to it as the years go on, don't you? And some of it, you have to take the time to air check yourself.
Yes. How often do you do that?
Regularly. Not in huge chunks. As you go along, you probably develop an antenna for what works and what doesn't. And then it's just sometimes it's a matter of just, I'm using that word too often, which is, if you don't listen back, you wouldn't pick it up. And you can correct it as soon as you're aware of it. But when you're not aware of it, it just keeps repeating. So, yeah, from those points of view. And then, we're both the same, is that your highlights do reverberate on you the whole time in broadcast the next day. So it's unavoidable. And it does make the ones where you go, I wish I'd done that a little bit better. They do make you squirm a little bit.
Give me a moment. This show is about positivity, and I'm going to spend 2 hours pumping you up. But you are your own harshest critic. It's funny you say that. I said to my wife 2 weeks ago, I did Sydney-Geelong in Sydney, and I said, you know what? I actually need to go back and listen to see how I'm going. And she said, it was a great call, and I went back and listened to it, and I used the word drive, as in he drives the ball forward, 4 times and a quarter.
Yeah, right.
And I was hating on myself, thinking, see, occasionally you do need to listen. What's a moment where you've thought, you know what? Would prefer to have that back.
The beauty of the job is doing justice to the moment and then capturing it and then seeing if you can help it to soar. So there's a couple of different levels in that. So the final play of the Super Bowl this year, I would love to hit that just a little bit sharper.
Okay.
Was it
a player ID thing, a moment thing?
I don't think so. It was just not quite as crisp and elevated as it might have been. It was the walk-off touchdown. I find, because it's all words, it's what do you reach for in the moment, right? And then some days, 3 days later, I'll be driving along and think, that's what I should have said.
Yes.
That's what I should have said.
Yes.
When Richmond won their 2017 flag, it was about 3 days later, I thought, oh, that was the essence of it. So I can't remember what I said, but but I vividly recall thinking that's what it was, and it just came to me 3 days later, which is completely useless and is there to torture you, isn't it?
It does torture you.
But so I figured out how not to torture yourself with it.
Go on.
So once it's done, it's there.
Yep.
And you can't have it over. You wouldn't want to have it over. So you've got to be able to live with it. And that's the motivation to get them all to that point, and you'll never get there. And that's the part I most love about it. It'll never be a completed body of work because you'll never quite know what you're going to see next.
But, gee, I have those moments. So, you know, when you're on a high building, there's that psychological thing where you think, what would happen if I jump? I have that after big sporting moments. So I was privileged enough to be at the MCG when the crowd just kept coming for Dustin Martin. And the only highlight that was ever going to live from that game was whether Dustin kicked a goal.
Yeah.
And I got my way through it. And if you said to me, this is how it's going to go, I'd say, yeah, I'd take that. But then you drive home and you think, imagine if I'd stumbled on that.
Yes,
and that's the bit that sends me home thinking, because there's that one momentary lapse in a game that's a 15-goal margin where someone takes mark of the year and you're having a sip of your tea or you're not quite there, and that will forever be on the record.
So that's the motivator, isn't it?
I think it is.
To give yourself the best chance. So you can't guarantee that you'll meet it, but it's to give yourself the best chance. Have I done the work that if this presents, and you either do or you don't, but did I give myself the best chance to meet that moment? So that's where I've learned to live with it and rationalise it. And it's also why I'll never be underprepared.
Yes.
You'll be shocked to know that I'm a compulsive preparer. I'm an chronic over-preparer, but it just makes me feel more comfortable.
I can tell that. And I can tell that. And that's why I wanted to get you in, because I can tell by listening to you how much preparation you must do. The average person will just think, oh, well, he just gets up there on Whateley for 3 hours. And I can tell with certain things you do how much preparation. Before we go back to where all this started, this is the first time you're going to have to put your Hall of Fame advice to the test. If I was to say to you, because I've got a strong idea as a listener, what is your greatest strength as a live sports broadcaster? What would you say it is? As he smiles nervously.
Yeah. So I am largely reluctant to answer that, but in the spirit of where we are. So
yes.
I like the idea of telling the story in totality. So for me, if I've called the moment or the game well, whatever gets written about it a day after, a week after, is actually in the call. Because you know the strands, you know what will last. You can place it instantly in its historic context, as well as the actual live moment. So that the accuracy that's the fundamental, and then everything else is the layers. But yeah, so my hope in these things is to be able to tell you the complete story in the shortest amount of time in the broadcast, and then we can all extrapolate and glow over it in the aftermath and tell stories about it. But the essence of that is actually in the call. So that's my aspiration for it.
I think for me, the thing that I listen to, and I think, my God, the man is eloquent. In the moment where people that haven't done our job won't understand, you do not have time to select adjectives out of a file in your brain. And some of the adjectives you use, adjectives that you use, which we'll get to later on in the NFL, is, to me, you use words that I think I might have called the same moment, and it just has not crossed my mind to use the level of wordsmithery that you sometimes not always have the ability to pull from your mind.
So that's the bit I love. So I would describe, I collect words,
right?
Read as broadly as possible, and just see a word and go, oh yeah, one day. So so it is a little bit of you keep a catalogue mentally, and then you reach for something.
Yeah.
So what do you reach for?
It's a great
well, who's to say? But if you happen to have collected a word along the way and you reach for it in the right moment, then that's the satisfying part to me. And in a way, that's the playful part of it as well. Is can you add something to it, or can you give something that's distinct? So it's all words for me. That the language is a beautiful and broad thing. I don't understand why you wouldn't use it as broadly as possible. It still has to be accessible, but there's all sorts of different ways of playing with those moments. So yeah, I have I would never have them written down, but somewhere in the back of your mind is, Black Caviar's Annihilating Stride, or The Art of Misdirection, or just something that you will have read and collected over the years that you'll go, that's what this is. I can see it, and that's what matches that. So not shoehorning something in on top of it, but going, that's what it is.
And you must have a, I think everybody that does our job must have some level of the ability to read and store. I think you must be above average. Like, were you above average in your written subjects at school, or information to read and then store?
Yes, it's probably not a great. So English lit, history, essays. That's me, and I really wanted to be a writer first. And the most satisfying thing I've got to do is write the Black Caviar book. So yeah, it's all the language and it's all the words, and then in what sort of different ways can you use it? Yeah, that's the most appealing part of it to me, and it's also the most, for me, it's the most creative part of it. And I'm really clear on it. Everyone should do it their own way.
Yes.
It'd be awful if we all did it the same way.
Have you ever tried to do it someone else's way?
No. However, I got to that early on. And then I remember Dennis Cometti talking to me once and saying, "You found your own voice," and that was very reassuring. As you don't want to be a poor imitation of somebody else. Find your own style and live or die by that. And that would have been in it's 10 or 12 years ago, and he was very kind to say that, and that was sort of really reassuring. That okay, so this will be my way, and it's not for everyone. But maybe it can find its place.
First ever recorded episode, not the first release, first recorded episode was Dennis Cometti. I went to where they used to stay at 7, I think it's the Hyatt, on a Friday lunchtime, and it was 7 years ago. He's like, "What's a podcast?" I'm like, "Dennis, I don't really know." He said, "What's it called?" I said, "The Howie Games." He said, "I don't think that's going to fly." I think he was probably right about that. So we're talking about sport and you growing up. I want to know about you as a young sportsman, because a lot of people wouldn't know. The great Adam White puts on Media 11 versus the MCC over there at the Albert, one of the great cricket grounds, and I've had the pleasure of standing at mid-off watching you wheel away for a very economical 6 or 7 over spell of bowling. Well, what were you bowling, G?
Straight breaks.
Straight breaks. Were you a cricketer, a footballer, a soccer player, a basketballer? I'm not talking watching, I'm talking about playing as a kid.
So I was a cricketer, but that is really overstating things.
Right.
So I was quite lucky, is when we would play our cricket, they were still small bats, and every park cricketer thinks they can hit the ball for 6, and very few could.
Correct.
I suspect with the new bats, they can all do it.
Yes.
And so I would come on to bowl, and you'd put long off, long on, deep backward square, and deep mid wicket.
All out.
All out. And then in our funny little media games, you'd win the bowling.
Yes.
Because everyone thinks they can hit the ball for 6, but they can't. And so that was what I traded on. No, so I was a really stodgy opening batsman.
Tell me your best day. Tell me your best day with bat in hand. No time for modesty, G.
No, I don't think there is a best day.
There's got to be a 50 or something.
My most memorable day was probably I was as well set as I'd ever been playing cricket. But it was Better Loosen Up's Cox Plate Day.
Oh, no.
And Dad had promised to take me, and I had to be out at a certain time.
Right.
And without a word of a lie, as I know friends will tell you this story, I jumped down the pitch, hit the off spinner straight up in the air, got caught, walked off, grabbed my gear, got straight in the car and went. And people went, "Oh, gee, he's really cracked the sads there, hasn't he?"
It?
And that was the time I had to be out to be able to get to Moonee Valley.
Right.
It's Better Loosen Up was probably the first horse I ever loved, and I wasn't missing that for anything. So that tells you something about my dedication to my cricket career. Howie.
Footy. Did you play footy?
Only in probably not after primary school. I was just too small and too scared.
Right. Too small and too scared.
Yeah. I've played a few social games, which have been super fun, and we had a season playing indoor footy out just over the Westgate Bridge.
I used to play that with Hutchie and Adam White. It was a great game.
So I was the stay-at-home full forward when no one else would stay at home full forward. It's just amazing how many goals you could get.
So as a stay-at-home full forward, now this might be a stretch, of the footballers you've caught, big full forwards in your time, who's the nearest comparison to G. Whateley, deep forward Altona?
So little forward pockets, squibs who just want to count goals.
Are you going to name any of those?
No,
I'm
not sure there's ever been one. You could never make it in any. But yeah, we strategically worked out that no one would stay at home and defend. So we would play revolution. We would play one shot at the contest.
That's
but
it.
As soon as we got it forward, it would be a goal. And then I rolled my ankle and did all the ligaments in it one day, and that was it. I'm not playing to get injured, Howie.
We're here to talk about the Olympics at some point. I had my nose broken in a semi-final out at Altona, and people that played out there will know how fun this game was 2 days before getting on the plane to Athens. And the pain I experienced from Melbourne to Singapore with a broken nose was not a good lead-in to an Olympics.
You get asked to play a social game these days, and you have to recognise where you are. I'm nearly 50. I can feel my Achilles grumbling already. Yes. I'm not doing
Well, Hutto did a horrible thing to his ankle a couple of years ago, didn't he? Years to get over it.
Yeah. So I never had any delusions. I only ever wanted to call sport, not play sport.
And did you want to do that as a kid?
Yep.
You did?
Yep.
Why?
Well, I can pin it down to a day sitting at the footy, and I was young, very young, and Dad said to me, "Imagine if they paid you to be here," and that's the seed of an idea.
Huh.
And then we grew up in an area where Peter Legrand and Clark Hansen were both in our parish area, and they were doing it. So it wasn't this abstract idea of that guy on the telly or that guy on the radio. There were these two guys who I would see regularly who were doing it.
See it, be it.
So, yeah. And then, pursued that along the way. I probably thought I would be a newspaper journo and writer, and then opportunities opened up that I knew I wanted, and sort of work relentlessly to be ready for it.
Were you, because you would be the same as me, you get, which is... It warms my heart, and it's very kind, and I think, well, I'm not sure I can help you here, but you would have a lot of youngsters email you, message you, text you, etc., about how they could get into sports broadcasting. Were you... Ray Warren came on this show, and he was talking about commentating marbles down his hallway out in the sticks in country New South Wales. Were you practicing?
I did exactly that.
What have you got for me? So what were you calling first?
So this was the age of... Green was Stylish Century, black was Dr. Grace, red was Vo Rogue, green would have been Better Loosen Up, white was Superimposed.
Marbles.
Yeah, so they were actually little billiard balls. I must have had a mini pool table.
Yeah.
And so you would line them up and roll them down and call them through. So, yeah, I've heard Ray tell that story and go, I was doing the same thing.
Did you record these?
Out. No.
Oh, no. Gee, now that would be a Howie Games exclusive if you could have got those for us. So it was on your mind, but as you said, you got into the writing caper and reading a bit, and you've worked with Tommy a lot, so he told me a few things. I'm very keen to explore your early writing days and your non-sports writing, and some of the stuff you were doing. So did you get one of the old school cadetships?
I did, straight out of year 12.
So how old are you? 18?
18. Didn't have a licence.
Right.
Started at the Herald Sun in the first week of January.
Near in the old building there?
On Flinders Street.
What's your first memories of your first day rolling in there? Did you have your mum would have bought your tie, or what'd you go with?
Yes, I think I had... it might have been the age of the cartoon characters on ties, I reckon.
Oh, you did rolling day one with a Daffy Duck.
I might have had a Mickey Mouse tie or something like that. This is right at the start of the 90s. So maybe. And it was a terrific program at the Herald Sun because you would spend the first 18 months moving through different departments. And so you do, I worked in the Weekly Times for a 6-week stint, cattle sales, out to the cattle sales.
What would have been the first thing that you wrote that was in the paper?
It was a lost dog story. It was the classic picture story. This is a dog that's been found. Go and write about that.
And when you saw your name in the paper?
It's a big moment when your first byline is published. And then I recall...
Hang on, cattle sales. I want to know what you know about cow. Tell me something about a cow that I won't know from your cattle sales department.
Yeah, so out to the auctions, top prices. What could you tell? So Ed Gannon, who it might still be the editor of the Weekly Times, he took me out and showed me the ropes. Police rounds. So there's a couple of really strong memories early on. Police rounds, you would work as the cadet the midnight till dawn shift. There was the PM edition of the paper.
How does that work? What's a police round?
You'd have... The office was on St Kilda Road.
Yep.
You would have a police scanner which would rotate through all the different police frequencies, and it would stop when there was action on one of the frequencies.
Sounds exciting.
So then you would listen and go, what's going on here? So there was a night where outside the old glass house, a petrol tanker rolled and exploded, and St Kilda Road was right there. So I beat the emergency services to the scene, and the whole side of the glass house was blown out. The truck was on fire. The road was on fire. The petrol was running down into the Yarra. So the bank and the river itself are on fire. And so sort of stand and observe that for a couple of hours and talk to everyone, witnesses and police and fireys, and then file for the PM edition of the Herald Sun, so front page story, and then it gets developed on from there. But you get that moment.
And did you get what? Because I've worked in a newsroom, but I was more your cat up the tree or UFO stories. So did you get this feeling that journalists talk about when you are around a big story?
Yeah, there's an adrenaline rush to it.
Is there?
Yeah, definitely. And you want to be as close as you can to it to observe and to document.
Well, sounding you're pretty close. You've been caught your Daffy Duck tie on fire.
I remember there was a siege, an overnight siege in a house in a suburb, and racing to the scene and getting inside before the police cordoned off the area, being inside that precinct.
You're a kid.
And thinking, what the hell am I doing here? But once you're in, you're in.
Right.
And to sit there and observe it all night with a view of the house and a view of the police activity around it, and watch it develop, knowing that you're going to write about it the next morning. I remember working one night, there was this is imprecise, but an escapee was in Fawkner Park, and the photographer and I...
Prison escapee?
Yep. And the prisoner and the photographer and I are there, and she found him. She found the escapee, and we directed the police over to where he was. So you, in those instances, and particularly working midnight till dawn, you were very close to it, and wrote the story about the Herald Sun photographer who the police were looking for.
And did you have days, mornings, when you're going back home, where you, it must be a very... Police spend a lot of time with police, I think, because they have experiences that a lot of us can't relate to. As a young man, were you having experiences or seeing things that took a while to wash away from you?
Yeah. So I was on the banks of the Maribyrnong when a body got dragged out that had been bowling balled. So 1, 2, 3 through the temple, and that was the work of Alphonse Gangitano.
Bowling balled?
Bowling balled.
Right.
And being there when it was pulled out talking to the police. So
you're seeing the dead body?
Yeah. There was a bail justice who was there who, in time, it turned out was sort of tied into the Gangitano story. That was the peak of the gangland wars, and just having the slightest glimpse into that. So, yeah, that was the first dead body that I saw. And because of the way you would do the job is once it was on the police scanner what was going on, you could be there in a flash and observing what was going on before really anyone else knew what was happening. So, yeah, that was the job. I'd never intended that to be my profession, so I was only moving through that. I'm probably talking about a 12-week period where so much would happen, yeah. And your morning, the last job of your morning was to ring every police station in Victoria. There was in the police rounds building, there was a list of every police station in every town with the number, and your job was to do the ring around and ask every office what's happened overnight. And things have changed so much now. It's all sanitised through liaison officers and that. But you would directly ring the station, and they would know who you were. They would know when your call was coming, and they would tell you this has happened in our region overnight, and it was either newsworthy or not. And then the last job was to complete the ring around and type it all up and send it to the chief of staff.
These are great stories, and people will listen to you and watch you now and think, "Wow, I had no idea you did this." So you did your cow sales, cattle. I think I'm getting cow wrong. Cattle sales, your police rounds. What else did you? Because you got into entertainment, which I want to talk to you about.
Yeah, and I did movies.
Now this because when we get to the player profile, I'll ask you about your favourite movies. So what's the key, G, to writing a good movie review? And what were the ones that you saw that made an impact?
So this is the differentiating factor. I wasn't the reviewer. Right. I was the writer. So I would do the interviews with directors and stars, and then I say with
big stars.
Big stars, yeah.
Was this the day when they put you on a plane, or?
Yeah. over to interview Steven Spielberg.
Oh, here we go. Here's a nice couple of name drops.
Yeah. So this is my name drop segment.
Right.
It's the only time I'll do it.
No, mate. I love a name drop. So you fly to LA?
Fly to LA. No, so that was London.
Right.
Saving Private Ryan, which was Spielberg's passion project, and it was his chance at his Oscar. He'd made the movie for his father. I was the chief movie writer at the Herald Sun, biggest newspaper in the Southern Hemisphere.
Uh-huh.
So when Australia got access to Steven Spielberg, it was then passed on to the Herald Sun to do, and that was my position to do it.
So how long do you get with him? You fly to London? An hour.
An hour in a hotel room in
That's
London.
A long
just
time.
the two of us there. That's a long time. I was a child of Spielberg, all of his movies, E.T., that's my vintage. And everyone's got a lot invested in. So the movie company, this is their one go at Spielberg in Australia. It's been years in the making for them. It's a huge badge of honour that they get this interview, and then you get the responsibility of doing it. And the hope is that you produce something that people will then read and go and see the movie.
Are they in the room with you?
No, it was an incredibly intimate experience. And that was particularly as a newspaper journo rather than any setup with cameras, or so you would record, but not with radio gear, is you would get the genuine one-on-one time. So you would get 45 minutes with Jack Nicholson, unfettered. So it was...
How was Jack?
He was Jack. So I couldn't tell you what Jack Nicholson is really like, but Jack Nicholson playing Jack Nicholson, it was an incredible show to witness.
Was
and
it
was
really?
a great copy to be able to work with, is my memory and write. And it was so satisfying to see. So my memory of it is, I'm getting a little bit older, so he wore this black shirt with flames. And so the effect was you would sit at him and his head was coming out of these massive flames. It was an amazing visual effect. And then again, if you'd done the research and knew what you wanted to explore. So I would guess that they would do sort of 5-minute television blocks. And you would get exactly the same 5 minutes because you just have to get the quotes that go on the Today Show. This is what we need to tell you about the movie. But doing a newspaper piece allowed you to explore a whole lot of different stuff. So you'd need the nuts and bolts. But then the challenge was to find all this other material to be able to write an interesting piece. And that was, if you did it right, you would engage the subject because they weren't getting that from anywhere else. They were just getting the same conversation over and over. And they know, they totally understand what it is. It's to feed the beast, to get people to go and see the movie and buy the tickets. But if you could give them a different conversation, and then you would have richer material to work with to try to write a good piece. And so my memory of the Spielberg setup was, I spent a lot of time talking about his father and his relationship with his father. And the most recent movie he's made is very much about that.
Indeed it is.
So to see that was sort of to go back to that moment. And with Nicholson, my memory is having read somebody talk about the way that he created each character. And if you could engage them in an interesting conversation and something that they were creatively up for, you could actually get some really good stuff. So that was always the benefit of getting a long period of time and being a writer, was that opportunity. And that was the most satisfying part of it.
And you obviously had your eye on sport.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah.
So what's your first sport gig? Is it the radio, or when you moved into the electronic
No, so
media?
it was at the paper. So I wanted a broad base of journalism. I do feel like when people ask you, I feel like that is such a good way to approach it.
Absolutely.
Not just to know sports journalism, but to know journalism. And as sport has evolved, is everything in general journalism is in sport. There's crime, there's politics, there's courts. It's all there. So if you did have a sound base that you could bring something other than the locker room mentality to it, particularly as people who haven't played, then that was the best grounding I found. So I would work a 6th shift at the Herald Sun for the Sunday Herald Sun, which they were very generous to let me do. So I would cover Saturday football, Saturday races, cricket in the cricket season, and get to write what amounted to a column on Sunday, which was, as I say, incredibly generous that I was able to do that as probably just out of my cadetship. So I always had an eye towards sport, but I wasn't in a rush to get there full time.
So this is now when we enter the first bit of vision I have for you. So when you speak to people that have been in the industry for a while, Timmy Hodges of the world. Tommy wasn't aware of this clip, young Tommy. You will know what the clip is as we get to it. But this clip we're about to show, it was very hard to get hold of. Very hard to get hold of. I spoke to the cameraman that shot this, Jared Pinder, and you'll see in the side of shot Johnny Carameludis was the audio guru. I rang Quarters. He said, I've seen it, but I don't know where it is. But we got hold of it. So
you found it.
I've found this,
Blimey.
and this, it's not in chronological order what I'm going to play to you. I don't know how long it is since you've seen this. But this, as a young man that had been working overseas on Formula One, came home around the Olympic time. This is my first memory of Gerard Whateley. So you can give me the backstory because Pinny gave it to me. But this is April 2000. There's a lot of controversy about Colonial Stadium. I think Hutchie had called it Death Valley. He nearly lost his job with Mr. Stokes. You're on Channel 10 News and you're crossing back to the great Stephen Quartermain and you are rudely interrupted. Roll the videotape, Tommy.
The issues with the turf and the poor public image at Colonial. So it's been long awaited here. We're about to be thrown off here, if you can believe this, Quarters. The two issues which have been resolved here today are the best seats in the house will now be sold first by Ticketmaster, and St Kilda will be asked to address their ticketing issues. Quarters, I can't believe this. We're going to have to go.
Keep going. I can't believe he's doing this.
We are hoping the clubs will leave happier here today. That was Ian Collins' suggestion, and I suppose the whole issue is that we are better for the fans.
Why is he, Gerard? Why is he kicking you out?
Apparently, we have been here all afternoon, Quarters, and we have been guarded by security guards on level 3 all day, and we're now being thrown off here.
Okay, well, Gerard, it looks like the problems at Colonial aren't over yet, so make sure you get that guy's name and number.
You've been asked to leave. No worries, Quarters. I'll leave you to it.
Good on you, Gerard Whateley out there at Colonial Stadium.
Now, there was Johnny K popping up. What's it like to look back, and what are your memories of that? That is classic telly. You can take your headphones off now. That's classic TV Channel 10 style.
Yeah, so that was very odd. I've got lots of different memories of that. So that's really early on. That might be week 3 on the job,
right? So
I reckon.
At Channel 10, you've got your big break.
So I started at the beginning of the footy season, so that's 99.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's week 3, I reckon. So they had all sorts of problems getting people into Colonial with all the new ticketing that was done, and you couldn't do walk-ups, and it was really a disaster.
Colonial being Marvel for those young listeners tuning in now.
So they had a summit involving everybody, and Ian Collins was in charge, and we'd been there covering the summit all day. And there wasn't a hint that we shouldn't have been there. We absolutely should have been there, and we'd been right to be there all day. And then I can vividly recall I started to cross, and I'm new to that.
And there's a lot going on.
I can see this security guard getting really edgy, and I'm thinking, oh, this is about to unravel badly. So I'm trying to concentrate. And
you didn't miss a beat, by the way. You did not miss a beat,
and then he intervenes, and he goes, so it's a confusing moment.
So for those, we'll put this out on socials, but for those that obviously can't see it, he walks directly in front of shot, a bit like what happened at the Chinese Premier's operation the other day in Canberra. Yeah. They were blocking you out of shot.
Yeah, so sound in the knowledge that we weren't where we shouldn't have been. So there were no risks being taken here. There were no liberties being taken. We'd been there. Ian Collins fully knew we were there. We'd been serviced throughout the day on a media front. Very unusual. And so a few different things happened. One, I thought, at the end of it all, I thought, oh, this security guard, one day we'll both look back at this and laugh. And then I saw him again at the Olympics, at the soccer the soccer that was in Melbourne.
Yep.
We didn't laugh about it when we saw each other again.
Well, what happened?
All I remember is we didn't laugh about it. My wife was overseas at that stage presenting at a medical conference.
Yep.
And she couldn't grasp what was going on. So the next morning, I'm the lead item on the radio news when the alarm goes off. You go, that's really weird. My memory is doing a whole sequence of interviews as the next day unfolded on FM radio. Eddie invited me in on the footy show. And Mike Sheehan rang me straight afterwards, probably in the hour after. So here are my two memories, and I'm pretty sure they're right, okay?
It's 25 years ago.
Mike rang me and said, that's the best thing that could have happened to you. Everyone in footy will now know who you are. Mm. And the second was, I can't remember whether I tell this in jest or whether it's real, but I think it's real. Tony Jones rang Anthony Mithen, they were the 9 team, and said to him, why didn't that happen to you?
I love what you do. on Whateley. But you need to talk some Formula One.
Yes.
I told you at the start of the year there's going to be another Aussie, so you're going to have Ricciardo and Piastri, and you haven't got your Formula One correspondent yet. And unfortunately, I probably know as much about Formula One as you do about horse racing, and it frustrates me that contractually I can't come on and tell you about what happened in Montreal or Monza or Miami or Monaco. But I'm going to use a Formula One analogy for you. So you are at the ABC, national broadcaster. If you're calling sport on the radio, cricket or footy, you have a national audience, and not is it just the capital cities. The thing I love about when I listen to the ABC, it's a bloke driving his tractor out the back of the Mallee somewhere, or a bloke on his harvester in northern South Australia. I love that about the ABC. So you're there. So you are Lewis Hamilton at McLaren. And then a bloke called Toto Wolff, in your world, Craig Hutchison, rings you and says, right, I've got this new operation. It's called Mercedes. We haven't got much. We're not flying on the track, but come here and I can turn this into something incredible. So Lewis made that. I want to know what Hutchie's pitch was to get you out of an iconic media operation into SEN at the time is not what SEN is now. So Hutchie's been on this show. He can sell more than anyone I know. What was his pitch, G?
Yeah, so there's a bit that goes into that, and my time at the ABC was incredible for me. But the signs of them drawing back on their sports coverage were really clear internally, and they were externally as well. And that was for everything from Olympic Games down.
Strange decision.
So you're at a point of time where the best years of your career are going to marry up with a time where sport is being just drawn back in. But the truth is I should have been under contract at the ABC. So I was left out of contract, which was clumsy. And Hutchie came to me
Did he know that?
No. Is when he came to me in November.
Yeah.
Or there was an intermediary who came to me.
Intermediary? He sent people.
And I said, well, actually, I am out of contract at the end of December. I shouldn't be, but I am. So that was 6 weeks away. So it was a really odd time to be, coming to an end of a contract and not being secure. And I should have signed a contract in June or July, which would have been 3 more years. But I'd had conversations with Claire. That would have been my last contract at the ABC. I would have moved. I would have looked to do something else in the aftermath of that rather than stay forever.
After another 3 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was in my mind. I wasn't going to be a lifer there. And that was just my choice. A lot of people wanted to second guess that. You go, that's just my choice. And
second guess it in what way?
As why would you leave, or this idea that you're betrothed there? No, it's a profession. So anyway, so it was interesting to me, but I knocked him back twice in 3 weeks, as I just couldn't figure out how it would work. But there are 2 aspects to it. One was to be able to do something under my own name, a very modestly named show, Whateley.
And your song, You're the Voice. Did you choose this?
No, none of that is me.
Are you sure,
So
G?
Hutchie uses that against me, but none of that was my choice.
Okay.
And the second part, he said to me, so I was at that time going, what would I like to do? What would I still like to do? And one of my things was I'd really like to go to a Super Bowl. And Hutchie said to me, how would you like to call the Super Bowl? And go, oh, yeah, that's...
He knows what buttons to press, the big boy.
He does. And then we tell this story privately. I don't know whether we tell it publicly. But
we're about to.
He didn't have the rights to call the Super Bowl.
It's got Hutchie's fingerprints all over it.
So we found out a way. We figured out a way to make it work. Shows and sports broadcasting and the Super Bowl. And then once he had me secure, he then used that with the NFL to go, well, I've got this guy to call the Super Bowl. How about we do a rights deal? And he's working with a runway of about maybe 6 weeks to get rights to the Super Bowl for me to go and call.
Genius.
And got it all to line up. And so we each knew parts of that story, and then we've swapped notes in the aftermath of it to great mirth. So I moved over. I did the Boxing Day test of an Ashes series at the ABC, and then had started on air maybe the last week of January at SEN, and my second week, the Monday of my second week, was the Super Bowl.
So we talk about the Super Bowl. I'm going to play some Super Bowl commentary. How much, just tell me briefly, again, we're coming back to touch on preparation. So anyone that wants to get into sports broadcasting, listen to what Gerard's doing to be able to do what he does. How much of the NFL season are you watching?
A lot. So I love the sport.
Okay, so that's not a chore.
No, it's not foreign to me. I know it and I understand it, but I've never thought about what it is to call it.
Okay.
And I've never heard it on radio.
No.
As a starting point. And then when I start to listen to it on radio, you go, oh my God, this sounds so great. Because it's a beautifully set up sport.
Radio sport.
It's a march up and down the field. It's very accessible. So for as complicated as it can seem, it's very accessible up and down the field in small chunks, and you're trying to... So I started to listen to the playoffs, and you go, I know exactly how to go about doing this, which is different to being able to do it. But I know how to go about doing this. It makes sense to me. So I watched every game of that playoff series, but listened to it on the radio rather than listen to the TV commentary.
And when you get in the box at the Super Bowl, I tell myself some days, it might be Friday footy, I'm going to drive up to do it on Triple M, and I'm like, I'm going to sit on the West Gate. It's a game that's not enthusing me. And then I think, hang on, you're getting paid to go and sit with what I would call 4 or 5 really close friends, and you're talking about football. You don't want to lose that perspective. So I sit there in the World Cup final commentary box sitting thinking, how on earth are they letting me do this? Like, honestly, how on earth are they letting me do this? Does that hit you prior to a Super Bowl call? Like, you're a dude from Melbourne.
Yeah. No, it does. So I don't have any trouble with that. I know it's the best job in the world. And even on a game that doesn't look like it's going to enthuse you, it could surprise the hell out of you. And there's nowhere I would rather be. I would be there as a fan. But as Dad said, imagine if they paid you to be there. So that's I can't get enough of sport. My days off, I'll go and see something else. Take the kids to the netball, to the basketball, go and see Geelong playing the footy. And you go, how do you watch it all? You go, I'd be watching it all anyway. I can't, I'm watching Prime, watching the T20 World Cup. I love it. Whether I'm going to be talking about it or not, I would be watching it. So I would have to work another job whilst trying to fit all of this sport in to fuel my passion.
Whack the cans on. So we talked about your eloquence. So you are going to use an adjective, and you'll, as soon as I say this, you'll know what I'm talking about. This is the 2018 Super Bowl. So the famous New England Patriots are playing with Tom Brady. I'm not a massive aficionado of American sport, but I know the basics. There's an adjective you use here that Tommy tells me ends up being printed on T-shirts.
Yes. Yep.
Amendola to the left. Wider out is Dorsett. Brady stands. Ball knocked out of his hands. Eagles recover. The Eagles get the ball back. The script is flipped. Tom Brady bereft on the turf. It has literally been ripped from his grasp. The Eagles with a 5-point lead with 2:09 left on the clock. And that was not what any sports fan around the world expected.
That has got me up. I need to go back and have a look at the highlights. So the word bereft. What did one adjective do for you and your brand and credibility and an Australian calling an American sport?
So it's just funny how something might connect.
Yes.
Subsequently, when we went back for the next... So there's a couple of different layers to it, and I couldn't say them out loud without sounding like a braggart, but so we went back the next year to the Super Bowl, and that's when I became aware. So stuff would ripple around on social media, and that would come back to you every 6 weeks or so from a Philly radio station or TV or a fan base, and it would just revolve
based around
mentions.
Bereft?
Yeah, bereft on the field.
Yes.
And then when we got to the next Super Bowl, Brian Curtis from The Ringer, who's become a great friend, he showed me that the Eagles fans had the silhouette of Brady printed on the T-shirt with the words "bereft" on the field, and this was one of their fan T-shirts.
Cool.
So that's cool. And then I became aware that the New York Times was delineating one portion of Brady's career by bereft on the field. So that finished that and then starts the next sequence. You go, wow. So that's how the ripple effect of something, if you frame it in a way that it connects to people. So like that's incredibly gratifying.
Yes.
That people would take that to heart and go, so that's in an Eagles fan's life, that might be one of the 5 great moments in sport that they've seen. And in their mind, they're going, that's the bereft on the field moment. And you're the one who's given them that phrase. Like that's, in a way, that's the essence of it,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yes. Everyone just wants one moment or one line that they get it right that truly connects to the fan.
And so it's about them.
Yes.
Like they love this moment so much, and then there's a phrase that they can attach to it, and that's what they talk to each other about.
Yes.
You know? So that's very, that's cool.
Your radio show, if people aren't aware, you can listen to it on the SEN app. You can listen to it from 9 to 12, Monday to Thursday on SEN. I love your guests. I love Bharat Sundaresan popping up, and I loved him when he came on this podcast. I love Peter Lawler popping up from New York. I love Nathan Buckley and the coach's view, Luke Hodge and the captain's view. I love Crash Craddock every Monday. And I've told Kingy this, my favourite hour of radio every week, and it tells me everything I need to know about the football, is the Monday Means Test. I think it's radio brilliance, and I've told Kingy this, and I've even sent him a photo. I listen to that on a Monday, in my board shorts, but in my sauna. And I get the Bluetooth going, and I get about 25 minutes in before it's just too hot, and I have to get out of the sauna. But I love that radio. And I spoke at the start about how I'm an enormous fan of what you do. You're to be congratulated by the hour, and I can understand it comes back to the preparation. You're not just going in there and asking Kingy some random questions. You are going in there tremendously prepared to deliver the best hour of football content I think there is week in, week out. It's outstanding.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you. That's going to be a hard image to shake on a Monday from now on.
It's all right. I got boardies on. Don't worry, G.
Yeah,
I want you to think of that next time you say that I'm sitting there in my sauna.
So it's Monday's the best day.
Yes.
So for all the action that happens, the chance to then disseminate and distill it, understand it. Monday's the best day in sports radio everywhere around the world.
Yes. It really is.
So how to bring it all together with in almost descending order as to what matters. What did we learn? And how does it relate to from where we were last week? So, you build categories and just snappy stuff that you go, okay, that helps you understand exactly why this is what we saw. That's why they're in the pressure index, and they're going to have to fight their way out of the pressure index. Anyway, it's a mechanism of radio that I think makes it really snappy. And then the modern world of podcasting is great. So we would dump the whole hour on you, but now we've got much cleverer of going, well, if you want to hear about Collingwood, they're in the pressure index. Here's your 4 minutes.
Yes.
So, but you cannot give people enough choice in modern life. So you can have the whole hour with us, but if you want to hear about those two teams, here's this one and here's this one. Take it for what it's worth.
So how much on your typical radio show on a Monday, which is your big day, because you've got your Monday Means Test in there, then you've got Crash, so you need to be across. I was listening the other day on the podcast, I do it catch up, and you were describing the last 5 holes that Rory McIlroy had played. Now, I watched the last 3 holes of the golf as a fan after I walked the kids to school. I know what happened in the golf. I wouldn't have had the amount of research you had up your sleeve to describe Rory's last 5 holes and the lipped out bogey, and then something about, that's putts within a metre. He hit 465 in a row. So this is what it comes to the essence. I can listen and understand the amount of preparation that is going into that 3 hours. When does that 3 hours, how many games, how much of the football are you watching? If there's 9 games and 100% is every game in its entirety, what percentage of football are you watching?
I'm seeing 6 at 100%. And
6 games at 100%.
Yep. And 3 in a different way.
Okay.
Whether that's flicking through it at speed, whether it's watching the mini, or whether it's just understanding what the stories are and then going to those bits and pieces.
Plus, you've got to be across the Australian swimming trials. You've got to be across the US Open.
But part of the footy is, yes, there's the action, but then there's the coaches' press conference. I find them mesmerising.
So you watch them?
So if I'm driving around, all I'm listening to is coaches' press conferences, just to try to get, so what did he say about that? And what is it? And that sometimes gives you the thread. So you could watch the 2.5 hours of the game, but you go, oh, no, it's about that.
Where do you get time for the Howie Games, man?
Yes.
You got a lot on your plate.
I use my driving time well.
Right. So
I use my time on my treadmill well.
But we're getting an insight into the level of preparation required, and that's for radio.
And sometimes you don't get to something, and you go, it nags at me. And I really wanted to hear Luke Beveridge, and I've run out of time. That's the stuff that will get me out of bed at 2 a.m. to go, I'll just go and listen to that, because then I'll feel better than once I've heard it. There might be nothing there for me, but it was going to nag at me all day.
So you could do that. You could wake up and go and...
Yeah, I just go and satisfy myself that at least now I've heard it. And then, but this is where I'm like I found the swimming absolutely riveting. So we'd get off 360 and come upstairs, and they seem to have scheduled the main race for 7:32 most nights.
Perfect.
And you go, bang, there it is. So there's Molly and Ariane striving for the wall together, and I've got to understand that. And I've been deep in European Athletics Championships, so the 2-screen strategy. I've got swimming here and athletics on the laptop, and but you can be. What was Sunday? Australia and Scotland.
Yes,
I couldn't look away from that. So North Melbourne and Collingwood start. So I'm going, I'll catch up with that once this is finished, because it looks like Australia.
So you double screening it, or what are you doing?
No, so this was my mistake. And so I'm just letting North and Collingwood go, and I get a text message and you go, oh, what's going on here? And it's 8-1. And you go, I should have just had the second screen going. So then you're re-queuing it, and this is where 7 minutes of quarter time and half. Anyway, yeah. So, but there's no substitute for watching it.
No.
So you can read about it and you can be told about it. But if you live it, especially if you live the emotional journey of it,
well, you can't.
That actually allows you to be able to convey it.
You can't watch the last 3 minutes of Collingwood North Melbourne and have full perspective on the way North Melbourne played in the first half.
No, like you had to hear Hutto say, oh, to be a North Melbourne, to be a shin boner today.
Yes.
To know that at the end you're going, oh, to be a shin boner today.
Yes. And
so you want to live that, and that's what. That's the richest radio material, I think, is if you can connect with people who lived that journey, and then they connect with you. Say, this is, the first thing of Mondays is just give me a raw response to what you saw.
Or talk about
just as raw as it can be.
Talking about the raw response, I need to, and Hutch, you'll be happy because I'm going to plug your sponsor, the Temper Text machine.
Yeah.
Now this fascinates me because I sometimes, I'm thinking about getting rid of Twitter.
Yes.
Okay.
So when I retire,
right,
one of the great liberators is going to be the first thing I will do will be cancel it. Because I won't need the source of information anymore.
No, and I won't need to promote the podcast. So that will be me done, because I'm not a natural social media person, but it delivers negativity in real time to your doorstep if you allow it to.
Yeah.
So the Temper Text machine, again, I'm in my car, so you'll know I'm a listener, and you're talking about umpires on the Monday means test, and then you come out of the break and you say, now, Kingy, the Temper Text machine, what do you have to what's the number?
0433 98 11 16.
Hutchie, I'm giving you that many plugs here.
I'll never shake that as long as I live.
I've never texted into the Temper Text machine. You're reading one line, one message saying, whenever you guys talk about umpires, it bores me. What's the point? They're not going to change their decision. Then you read the next message. Why aren't you guys talking about the umpiring? It was a disgrace over the weekend. And it gives me an insight. What is it like having real-time feedback into the passions of not just Melbourne and Australia, because you're national now you're international due to streaming. And how do you deal? I can tell from Kingy, because I can tell it must have an effect on him, because he'll say, I know Essendon people are going to hate me saying this.
Yeah.
And he's got that direct feedback in front of him. How do you go with direct feedback? And you do an amazing job, but the job we're in, I haven't seen the text machine, so I don't know the negativity you get.
Like, it's an absolute phenomenon. You could sell subscriptions to the Temper Text, because it is right to the heart of the way people follow sport rationally and irrationally. It is as pure as it can be. So you can get everything from, so I can say it's a beautiful sunny day in Melbourne, and someone will text in, well, that's just rubbish. It's raining. Or how can you talk about the sunshine when it causes cancer like this? And why are you talking about Melbourne when the weather in Brisbane is just so much better? So I can say I'm 49 and someone will text through and go, you're not 49. You go, oh, this much I'm pretty sure I know. So it's an incredible cross-section of the community.
Have you had to develop a hard shell?
No. So this is where everyone's got a different relationship with it. So I'll only talk about mine.
Yes.
I knew coming into SEN what it was, and I was going to be on really good terms with it. It amuses me endlessly. And I feel like I know when to use it at the right time. And I also think there's a playful aspect to it. Is when I've annoyed people, they will call me Gerald. I sort of feel like that's our wink and a nod at each other. So I don't know you, but if you've texted through Gerald, then I've really annoyed you.
With an L in it.
Yeah, yeah. And so people are onto that. Every now and then someone will ring and say Gerald, and you go, that's a bit rude. But on the text, you go, it's respect. So that's one part of it. Yeah, you have to be cognizant that people follow sport in a different way to they follow everything else. So your club allegiance is likely to override. If you find the right abusive one in the right tone at the right time, I reckon it's laugh out loud material. So don't get me wrong, I know you passionately believe this, but that's just making me laugh.
Yeah.
You can get some super intelligent stuff. So what I'm most interested in are those who want to engage in the debate. Don't be scared of the debate. I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm staging the debate. Do you want to make a contribution to it? Don't be scared of it. So the ones I can't have the people who go, I'm flicking off now. And you go, well, go. If you're too challenged by having the debate around holding the ball, then this is not the forum for you. But inevitably, those people, they're still there the next day going, I told you yesterday I was going to turn off. You go, you didn't turn off.
You're back again, yeah.
The Jake Fraser McGurk was a great one for that. There's somebody who just, if you talk about Jake Fraser McGurk, I'm gone.
I loved your passion for
you're still talking about Jake Fraser McGurk? You go, you're still there.
You're still there. You're still there.
Yeah. So it doesn't put me off, but you can't broadcast to it because I don't know about you, but I've never called a radio station in my life.
No.
I would never call a radio station in my life. And I've never texted a radio station, and I would never text a radio station in my life. That's not me, but I'm part of the community.
Yes.
I'm deeply engaged in the community. So that is not representative of everyone. It's representative of very specific people, and you can get a really great cross-section, but you can't broadcast to it. So my favourite ones are when you'll talk about Jake Fraser McGurk, right? And you'll get it's the number of texts is overwhelming. They're about 16 on a screen at a time. And when you're in full flow on a Monday, you won't even get a chance to look at a screen before they're gone. And so you have to scroll down through them. So you get literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And someone will text you never read my texts. And perversely, those are the ones I like to read.
Yeah.
But I just didn't see your text. So you try to you're snatching at, I need 6 that give me all the different views of this. Across they go, and they're the ones that you read, but there's this constant flow.
I'm amazed when you said something earlier on that it could be a show in itself. I'm amazed that Hutchie hasn't managed to like, if you put up a feed on your SEN app of the messages coming through somehow. I'm just spitballing with you here, G. It sounds quite captivating. Hutchie will be listening to this. If there's a dollar sign in it somewhere, he'll figure out a way to do it.
People don't realise that their phone number comes through with it.
Okay.
And there's quite often once the name's attached to a number in a computer system, the name will come through as well. So you aren't nearly as anonymous as you think you are when you're sending that through.
There's a lesson.
Go, I'm not sure I'd be publishing that if I were you. And then you get that, the ones who I was going to say is in the Jake Fraser McGurk stuff where you'd get 400 messages in 8 minutes, and you'd get one person saying, "No one's interested in this. Boring." You go, I reckon you're the one, and I totally get that you're not interested in it, but don't miss the fact that we are so deeply, and so I've got the real-time evidence. I've got 400 people who've been so moved to participate in this one way or another, and one person who's going, no one's interested in this. And I did the stats on Thursday Night Footy, the actual facts as published by Channel 7, and somebody texts through and goes, 90% of my mates hate Thursday Night Footy, you should get the facts. And you go, I'm pretty sure those published numbers that measure the audience outweigh your idea that 90% of people hate it. So I'm going to say those are the facts.
Correct.
And that yours isn't. But you passionately believe that with all your heart. That's why you've texted through. So if that's where it is reflective of some, and the sum is real, it's not all. So I can't broadcast to that one person and stop talking about Jake Fraser McGurk when it's such a captivating debate across the sporting landscape. And you go, if I'm not talking about that, and it's one of the three most important, well, what the hell am I talking about?
Yeah, mate. It's I love the Jake Fraser McGurk discussion, full stop. To be honest, the way it's going, as we're going this to air, I think your man Andrew McDonald, who I love on your show, had a very good reading of the pitches in the Caribbean, and so far David Warner is doing an outstanding job.
Yeah,
anyway,
so there's one pitch in this tournament that would be totally set up for Jake Fraser
St.
McGurk
Lucia?
at the right time.
Is it where Darren Sammy
That was
Stadium?
yesterday, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, that's the one where you'd want him, but the rest of it has looked like what Crash calls heavy-duty World Cup cricket.
And I love when he talks about that with heavy-duty cricketers. He was big on keeping Marnus in the 50 over World Cup. He was big on keeping Steve Smith in there.
But it doesn't mean we can't debate
No.
it.
Oh, no, that's the fun of it.
And they shouldn't take us too seriously. Like you want, I said to them at the time, and you want the whole nation talking about who's going to play in this T20 World Cup.
My word.
This is a great thing for cricket, as opposed to it being just off Broadway on a streaming service that we don't really have and we're not that interested. Like we were so passionately engaged in the build-up to this tournament. This is where you don't have to agree with us, and you don't have to you certainly shouldn't select the team the way we tell you to, because we change our mind 6 times in the next 4 weeks.
On the back
I think with coaches, right? If you let the football public run coaches, you would sack 3 coaches within the season, and the coach that started would actually be reinstated by the end of the year. You don't want to govern to satisfy us. But what you do want is, if the whole nation is talking about Jake Fraser McGurk, that is a great thing for cricket.
Absolutely, it is. Absolutely. I've taken up a lot of your time. The Olympics, you've called the swimming for the ABC before, famously called Kyle Chalmers. We'll put that in here, Tommy. We don't need to revisit that at that moment. You get the opportunity to call the athletics for the Nine Network in Paris. You do it your way, but you're coming off a Bruce McAvaney era who has no peer. How much work is going in to preparing to call all those athletic events in Paris? Now there's a focus on the Australians, but the great thing about Bruce was he would know all the international stories as well, and I know your level of professionalism, you'll want to do the same. I can't comprehend the amount of work that will be going into something like this, because you're not watching it day in, day out. Prior to being asked to do this gig, you're not tuning in, I wouldn't imagine, to the Diamond League.
No. I have a working knowledge of it from big international meetings, but at the start, not more than that. There's a lot of work going. There's a lot of athletics playing in our house at the moment. So I feel like you probably quiz my kids on aths, and they'd be able to get pretty close on Karsten Vorheim.
So it's an enormous.
Like Goodbritson. Yeah, so it feels enormous. But then when they get to the blocks, it's a race. And there's either 8 of them in lanes, or there's 16 of them on the starting line, or 22. So I will feel more comfortable talking about this in hindsight than I will going in.
I understand that.
I hope. So learn it, know it, and then figure out the mechanics of it, and then go and do it my way. So I couldn't do it like Bruce if I tried, and I would be mad to try.
It would be a disaster too. So
I'm developing the grasp of how I'm going to do it. But I've got charts everywhere. I've watched,
what do you mean everywhere? Like stuck on the wall type material?
In my office. I carry stuff around with me, and if I have a spare 5 minutes waiting to pick one of the girls up from dance, just read it, just absorb it, watch. So I'm watching. Probably the funniest tick I've developed is any 100-meter race from any era, from any venue, kids race, professional race that comes up, I'll watch it. They go, how quickly can I see who the winner's going to be? You've got 10 seconds to get them, less than 10 seconds to get them from the blocks to the line. How quickly can you see the pattern of it? Where's your eye going?
Have you practiced calling them?
So I'm not going to answer those questions just yet.
Right, no, that's fair
but
enough.
I'll be fully ready to do it. It's been so my favourite part is the research.
Okay.
This has been the best project I've undertaken in years.
Well, I think
but then you have to deliver against it.
it would have to be the favourite part, because I don't think you could embark on a project of this breadth and scale and not feel good about the preparation or to drive.
And you're
around
not
the
on
twins.
your own. So I'm going into a really well-established team.
Yes.
Tamsin and Dave Colbert have been doing this together for years. And I know exactly what they bring to it as a listener,
Yes.
as a viewer.
I love David Colbert.
So
And Tamsin.
I know what my place in that will be when we get together.
When you're doing that, are you calling the field events as well?
No. So
Okay.
Dave will
So
have the
Dave's
field
doing
event.
that.
So he's going to call the
I
glory
love his
moments.
descriptions
Yeah.
of when the big Ukrainian hammer thrower
Yeah,
comes out,
yeah.
and the way he can roll into that whole equation.
Yeah, so he's going to call Australian gold.
Yes.
I think it would be a surprise if I ended up calling an
Yes.
Australian gold. So knowing the levels of achievement and success is what would it represent for this runner to get to a semi-final or a final? What's the history of that in finals? And a medal would be just phenomenal for a handful of them. But also, the most exciting part of athletics is what this team's going to look like in LA. And then specifically what it's going to look like in Brisbane.
That's right.
Like the young members of this team they're the ones. So you're going to get to know Tori Lewis, and then you're going to have a blue chip investment in her. Claudia Hollingsworth is wait till you see what's going to happen here as a down payment for LA, and then maybe the full fruition in Brisbane. These things build across games. As Sally Pearson was that story, Kathy Freeman's that story. So I feel like this is, in all likelihood, the foundation games for the glories that are to come on the track. That would be my read at the moment.
I can't wait to hear you call it. Whack these on for one final time. Tommy, we need to go to the Andy Marr special here. Carlton Collingwood at the MCG, August 2022. If you haven't seen this, check out the SEN clip just for our man Andy Marr. So I've got a question off the back of this, but this is G calling an incredible Magpies win over Carlton. I love that. And from a commentary perspective, the pauses that you had to allow the crowd surge is what you're trying to do at a packed MCG. Take these off. Now,
it's a symphony, isn't it, when the crowd's going? And that's like the
is.
MCG. We are so blessed that that's our ground.
Yes.
So the symphony of the crowd is don't fight the symphony. Work out how to work it in.
Now, this question, I don't know about your contractual situation. So if this hits the cutting room floor, G, 100%. I listen to the way you call that. I see the way you call the cricket, both on the wireless. The obvious question is, why am I not seeing you call AFL football on the television or cricket on the television when you work for media companies that have the rights to those events?
It's probably not a question for me to answer. Like, you can't put yourself into these things.
Okay.
Whenever I've met resistance or bitterness from people as to why I've got opportunities, you go, you don't forge your way into these things and claim them for yourself. You have to be entrusted with them, and then you have to be rostered to them. So that's the easiest answer is I haven't been asked to.
So it's not from a lack of want?
No, I would like to call sport on the telly as time goes on. Yeah. But that hasn't been my place where I've worked. And that's the easiest answer. And it's what I get to do is so fulfilling. Like, I will, you wait a lifetime for a show like 360 that gets you to take you through 13, 14, 15 years. So
My word.
And then the theatre of the mind in radio, I love that. Yeah. So if if the opportunity arose, my position on this has always been the same. If the opportunity arose, I would love to do it. But that's for others to choose.
What do you reckon, Tommy? Should our man be calling on the telly? It's a big thumbs up from Tommy. Well, I'm not sure we hold much sway here, G, in the television executive landscape, but I think it would be a natural thing to happen. G, we always finish this the same way, and I could have gone for another 3 hours, but I know you've got more athletics research to do. For those young listeners out there that want to achieve success, you've achieved tremendous success to this point in your career, and there's a lot ahead of you, and good luck in Paris. I really look forward to listening to you and Dave and Tams, and you'll be a nice, quirky combo. It'll be fantastic. What advice would you give to the youngsters out there that are trying to achieve success in their field?
Yeah, find what you want and work relentlessly towards it, and it's on you. So don't fear the work, embrace the work. Don't fear the grind, embrace the grind. The best part of it is the work. And then there's nothing more satisfying when the work delivers you to what you hope, to the opportunity of being at these great moments. So yeah, that idea of find the job you want and work relentlessly to give yourself the best chance to get it. That appeals to me. And we've had, in recent times, in the last week, we've had Roger Federer and Tom Brady sort of give those insights into, are you prepared to work harder than the other people who are striving for it? And when my days are done, I'll know the answer to that for me personally was yes. So how much do you want it? Do you just say you want it? Or do you really want it? So that's on you. So don't worry about what other people think and say. Is if you want it, go and make it so. So
I want to come on your show and talk Formula 1G. So I don't know who we need to speak to. My boss here, your boss, my producer, your producer. I want it. I'm not just saying it, G.
Yeah, no, and it is a whole.
There's a hole. You used to have Jeff Harris on back in the day.
Yeah. So I've thought about this a lot.
What do you come up with?
The races right now are too boring for a weekly slot. So we have to break the monopoly. It has to be competitive.
It's just starting to happen.
Yeah, I agree.
The Ferraris.
And then Oscar Piastri's first podium, you go, so that's the front end of it, is if Oscar's going to be a winning chance 6 times a year, then you want to be well set for the days where that happens.
Well, maybe if there's a big event, if there's a big performance, just ring me, G. Just send me a text. We'll come up with some contractual situation and we'll bring F1 to Whateley.
Always ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Correct.
Oh, I shouldn't have done that, should I?
Correct.
Sorry.
Correct. Just say Mark Howard's on courtesy of the Howie Games. That'll be fine, G. Treat to chat with you, mate. Travel safely to Paris. Look forward to the call. Thanks for joining me on the Howie Games.
What an honour. Thank you, Howie.
Good man. Well done.